I can't be the only one who ended 2021 with the words, "Thank God that's over." And come to think of it, I'm pretty sure that's how I've actually ended every single year since 2016.
Thank God that's over.
But it turns out that just because the Earth has finished another orbit around the Sun doesn't mean that all our problems reset. It seems the climate is still changing and the corona is still virusing. Except now, on top of that, we have a new devastating war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This has destroyed lives, destroyed cities, it's forced millions from their homes, and it's reminded the entire world just how fragile peace can be. Now, I've seen several people discussing how fossil fuels are fueling this war, and that is incredibly important. But I've been wondering something else. How can climate change make conflicts like this more likely? To be super clear, there's absolutely no suggestion that climate change itself influenced this particular war. But for conflict in general, we know that climate change is a threat multiplier.
This basically means that everything bad, climate change makes worse. So hurricanes, worse. Extreme heat, worse. Crop failures, worse. Adam's jokes, worse.
This is my friend Miriam. She's also a climate change researcher and has a fantastic environmental YouTube channel. In fact, I recently helped her out on a video about the latest part of the Ipcc report, which you can check out up here. And while you're there, why not leave a comment to say I sent you? In this video, we're looking at what the links between climate and conflict actually are.
And spoiler alert, it's pretty complex.
Let's start with a famous
and famously poorly handled
case study, the Syrian Civil War. This devastating conflict has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, forced millions of people from their homes, and had knock-on effects across the globe. Plus, it's still going on today. So when a study claimed that climate change had caused this conflict, this was a huge deal. The argument, perhaps you've heard of it, goes something like this. Climate change drove a devastating drought which forced many people from their homes. This destabilized the country and was a major factor in triggering the Civil War. Not only does this example seem to show stark evidence of the chain reaction that can take climate change and transform it into large-scale conflict, it also apparently shows that that chain reaction is here today.
There's just a few problems with that. Claiming climate change sparked a massive war by looking at climate models and observations sort of leaves out a major piece of the puzzle: people. Now, of course, no one is saying that the only cause of the Syrian Civil War was climate change. But was climate change even one of the causes? The story still falls apart because there isn't evidence that the drought resulted in millions of internally displaced migrants, nor is there evidence that the migration that did occur contributed to the war beginning. It's even disputed how much, or even if, climate change played a role in the drought. So the picture is far messier than it seems at first.
And that's a theme in this topic, the messiness of this picture. In theory, at least, it can be quite clear how climate change could cause conflict. For example, it can make resources like food and water more scarce or more expensive.
Competition for these can boil over into violent conflict.
So that means that's actually my line.
I think you'll find that line belongs to me.
I think I know whose line this is.
I was supposed to say
I wrote the script, and honestly, I think who and don't worry, I know that was very convincing, but that was all just acting. An example of how resource competition can lead to conflict. Miriam and I are just as close as we ever were.
Which is not at all.
Oh.
There are plenty of other ways climate change could drive conflict. For example, extreme weather events causing massive shocks to a society. But it's important to remember that climate change doesn't cause conflicts. It exacerbates the causes of them by making them more likely.
Just like how working on 2 collabs together didn't cause me and Miriam to become best friends, it just made it more likely.
We are, and I cannot emphasize this enough, not friends.
I'm going to ignore that because I know you didn't mean it. But speaking of interpersonal conflict, research has actually tried to quantify how big an influence global warming has on this kind of violence. And it has found that as things heat up, that does indeed increase the rate of interpersonal conflict. But the research found that conflict between groups increased 5 times as fast.
Truth is, unpicking all of this is really difficult, and there's no agreement on the best methods to do this, let alone what the conclusion should be. Ironically, there's a lot of academic conflict about climate and conflict.
So to pick apart this thorny academic issue, we'd ideally want some kind of huge report that pulled together all the research, assessing the links to climate change and evaluating just how clear those links are.
You mean like the Ipcc report on climate impacts and adaptation that came out literally 1 month ago?
Oh yeah, that'd do it. So this report says a bunch about the links between climate change and conflict. And firstly, while it's clear that climate change could influence conflict, it's far from the only factor and far from the most important factor. As the report explains, violent conflict and, separately, migration patterns in the near term will be driven by socio-economic conditions and governance more than by climate change.
As you'd expect, though, that picture changes the more we heat the planet up. At higher global warming levels, impacts of weather and climate extremes, particularly drought, by increasing vulnerability, will increasingly affect violent interstate conflict.
So we've got this complex picture where climate change can influence conflict, and this will get worse in the future as the world heats up. But there are all these other, often more important factors at play.
But the relationship isn't one way. It's not just about climate change increasing the threat of conflict. Conflict also influences the threat of climate change impacts. Or put another way, societies at conflict are more vulnerable to climate change. Vulnerability is higher in locations with violent conflict.
So we can't draw a straight line between climate and conflict. If we drew anything at all, it would just be a tangled mess. But even through this mess, it's becoming clearer and clearer just how much these two threats can feed off each other.
And we haven't even spoken about how our fossil fuel habit pays for and even starts wars, or how conflict and climate change can feed off each other to make certain problems worse, like how the war in Ukraine and an unstable climate are both raising the cost of foods, risking the most vulnerable people across the globe not being able to feed themselves.
So how do we begin to get ourselves out of this mess? Well, earlier this week, the Ipcc, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released the 3rd part of its crucial report. And this part, finally, handles what we need to do to stop global warming.
Adam joined me in a video over on my channel to break it down.
You can watch that over here. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed to Miriam's fantastic YouTube channel. She's got some of the best environmental explainers that you'll find.
Oh, thanks, Adam.
No worries, that's what best friends are for.